Welcome back, you legends. As promised, the vehicle has returned from tuning, and we're going to go through just where the vehicle is at currently and a bit of an update from the last video. First thing I want to get into is a bit of a wiring update, because there was some things that came to light after the last video. So a couple of more signals needed to be split between the two ECUs. So we'll take a quick look at the wiring diagram and we'll go from there. So on our wiring diagram, this is not the most up-to-date printed version. However, if you are chasing any of these documents, I did mention last video that I would include them in the video description. It appears that that link didn't really work too well. However, I have uploaded everything to the Evolution M forum. So it's there. If you're generally interested, I can point you in the right direction, but it shouldn't be too hard to find. Alright, so the conditions that were occurring after I put the 12 volt ignition in were, yes, I could change gears. However, there was quite an abrupt change to the gear when you would go up or down. What I found that to be is on the gearbox, well, most gearboxes in fact will have like a shaft speed sensor. These have an input and an output shaft speed sensor. The diagrams that I found only referenced a ground, so I just thought that was a chassis ground. Having previously connected all the chassis grounds, I thought it was okay. But reading into it, I found that it was more likely a sensor ground. So I just went ahead and split the sensor grounds, and that resolved the issue. So I got back in touch with Brett very recently with regards to that, and the diagrams he looked over, pin 16 here on the stock ECU wiring, that is the one that potentially controls all of the shaft speed sensors. And this sensor ground here, he found at least it connects to the coolant temp sensor. So that was the last of the sensors that I end up splitting between the two ECUs. So we'll dive into the footwell and I can show you those quickly. So you can see in here things have changed a little. I'm getting closer to, let's call it a final product. So Haltech ECU, I've got it on a bit of a ghetto 3D printer mount at this point in time. It's a bit of a work in progress, but intent is to use this point here and this point up, that point up there, and basically position it in a way that I can just mount the Haltech up there in behind the glove box. However, the glove box will probably have a date with a hacksaw blade just so I can still close the thing. But yeah, so that way it's all, let's call it, properly mounted. Stock ECU's back into its original position, and down in here I've pretty much stripped all the sheathing and tape right back to the firewall. So that'll allow me to basically, once everything's, all the wiring's, let's call it, finalized, be able to put these back up into position, tape up everything nice, put the little kick panel back on so they're all protected, and the big loom in the back here, that'll be able to get all taped up and routed up towards the back of the footwell there, so it's out of people's way. And then all of this wiring here, you can see all the new Deutsch connectors that I got. These are basically either a 6-pin or a 4-pin bus connector. So that's how I've done all the other signals now, rather than the 12-pin. But this guy here, this is all the sensor grounds. So this one, you basically got the pin 16 and 57 sensor grounds. So end up having to do a bit of a split on that, so that way I can go up to the stock ECU and then into the Haltech plug and play. So those sensor grounds resolved my input and output shaft speed sensor issue, and yeah, the gnarly shifting that was happening on the gearbox. So from that point, it was back to OEM fresh again. So yeah, pretty happy with all of that now. But you can kind of see here, along with the sensor grounds that I discovered, I rerouted the 12 volts and the grounds. Now you had, what was it, 41, 42, 47, 48 I think it is for your 12 volt and your grounds. So there was 2 lots. I've used 1 lot, so you've got a power and a ground, and then a power and a ground here. Basically split that out, so 1 lot of 12 volt, 1 lot of ground is going to the stock ECU. Same thing for the Haltech plug and play. And all I've done there is just basically split out the 2 12 volts into 2 12 grounds, and both ECUs are perfectly happy. So I did contact Haltech just to ask them a generic question, because they referenced the fact that you must have 2 of the 12 volts, like the 2 12 volt signals going in. Realistically, it shouldn't matter, because it's just power and ground. And yeah, they said there shouldn't be any problems with that. And considering the car's all tuned and there was nothing that catastrophically happened, it would be a reasonable assumption to make at this point that shouldn't have any particular issues moving forward. So that's a little bit of update on the split ECU wiring here. Yeah, I do need to make some improvements to this, because this is obviously not ideal. But since everything's working now, I can get back to this at a later stage. And what I may end up doing is something a little rudimentary, but pretty much just probably soldering in extensions in the on the wires or in between them, so that way I can still see the factory coloring and be able to route it in a manner that basically tucks all of this up underneath the glove box here, so it can still be a usable area for passengers, because practicality. And yeah, quickly discuss the mount there. So got a few more iterations that I need to make of that, well, design, and then a mate will print. But that'll be where the Haltech will live. So yeah, one step closer to being this area kind of being finalized. But at this point in time, everything is working. It is fantastic. Yeah, apologies for the lighting. I'm just in the garage with the roller doors down, because here in SA it is hot and windy as all buggery, so I'm trying to cool the garage down with the aircon, so I'm not sweating my gonads off in here. So yeah, apologies about the lighting. One thing I have kind of seen online, just a few remarks here and there, is the actual ECUs themselves. So the wiring diagram or the color scheme that I'm using was based off of an Evo 7 GT-A. However, I've seen a few remarks to say that the ECUs between the 7 GT-A and the 9 GT-A are the same. Technically, they have different part numbers. So the reason why I'm kind of mentioning this is don't think that you could potentially get an Evo 9 GT-A ECU to put into your 7 GT-A or vice versa for some particular reason. It may make the vehicle unhappy. They are definitely 2 different ECUs. I can definitely for a fact state that at least the Evo 9 GT-A, it has a map sensor, of which the 7 GT-A does not. So likewise, the Evo 7 GT-A was an Evo 7 version of the 4G63. This thing was an absolute hodgepodge. So I did reference it in an earlier video, but these things have the 7 GT-A turbo. I'm not too sure if all the boost control accessories for the turbo are from the 7 GT-A either, or whether or not they used a later model Evo. The block is an Evo 9 and the head is an Evo 8. So I don't know what updates the sensors or firmware or whatever the case was between the 2 iterations of the ECUs. It could have just been a basic, like a version update of the same ECU and given a different part number. I'm not too sure. But on a very surface level, they are not the same. So please take that into consideration if you're wanting to modify your GTA. Just some information I've seen out online. Okay, now for the fun part. Yeah, it's currently a Saturday. I dropped the vehicle off on Wednesday morning to a local tuning shop, Driven Motorsport, and yeah, managed to pick the vehicle up this morning. So vehicle is now all completely tuned properly, and yeah, no significant issues relating to at least the dual ECU setup with yeah, the aftermarket ECU and the stock ECU. So yeah, pretty happy overall how things have turned out, and we'll just go through some of the things that kind of happened in that process and kind of show you some of the things that I've had done to the vehicle whilst it was there. So one of the things that I mentioned was going to happen was needed to get the intake air temp sensor installed. So you can kind of see that just in there now. Obviously the ideal situation is to try and have that as close to the throttle body as possible, and you can see here that that's the new pipe that was manufactured, so that way they could put the bung and the intake air temp sensor into something. So yeah, that was all fabricated, and as you can see, it's quite nice and basically follows the factory configuration of this nugget. So obviously that would have been the stock pipe in there, and yeah, basically just replace it with a metal piece now. So the plan is to do some intercooler piping and potentially an intercooler upgrade at some point in time. I don't think it's going to be in the near future at this point, but on these things at least, the hot side intercooler piping is typically the problematic bit because it kind of gets a bit squashy, and the J pipe coming off the turbo is a bit average. So, but the cold side, yeah, not too much of an issue, so I don't need to worry about any clearance issues or anything like that now. Just it looks moderately factory, and I believe that size intercooler piping is going to be more than okay with my current requirements. So yeah, that's installed. That is looking absolutely mint. Now, going to go through some of the issues that kind of just occurred in the Dyno tuning process. So this car tends to have a bit of a love-hate relationship. It just will fight you for a little bit, then it finally gives in, and then you're just off to the races. So everything is now sorted and fixed. There's no outstanding issues, but standard just old car shit. The factory boost controller wasn't allowing over 8 pound of pressure, and whilst it had been working completely and utterly fine up until very recently, that was the day it decided to want to shit itself. So yeah, the guys down at Driven had to install a new aftermarket 3-port boost controller. So that's now installed. You can maybe get the right light. Just down a knee, might have seen the shiny nut. So from what they were saying, there it is. That's typically where it's mounted on manual Evos. On automatic Evos, it's down in the nether regions in there. So of course it was an absolute bitch to get out and take off. Again, just the vehicle just wanting to have a bit of a hissy fit. But yeah, that's off now. Replacement boost solenoid, so that was just something that kind of just popped up in the process, but full boost control back now, which is fantastic. I may have mentioned in a previous video that when they were trying to previously dyno the vehicle, there was a lot of knock. Normally the factory OEM ECUs, if they're untouched because of the better quality fuel in Japan, these things run a fairly aggressive ignition timing map, which again leads to the knock when they come over here. And again, they ran the car up on the dyno and were suffering a bit of knock. They contacted, I think it was Benchmark Solutions. So if you've been around the Evo scene, you've probably heard of them at least anyway, or had your car tuned there. They mentioned that they have found that quite a lot on these, and the trick is to just basically run a colder plug. So it went from a 7 heat range to an 8 heat range plug, and lo and behold, the knock disappeared. So if you're tuning your car at home, or you're getting a bit of knock, or you know it is knocking, and everything else is functioning correctly, then you possibly may be able to get away with running a colder plug to get rid of that knock. Because obviously knock isn't good, because it'll reduce timing, and you're just not going to get the most efficiency out of your engine. So that was probably the biggest issue that they had on the vehicle. Yeah, once that resolved, yeah, everything was happy days. So they did run, coming back to the IAT sensor, sorry, yeah, they ran a new loom into the little hole in the firewall that I had, plugged it into the plug and play unit. So you can see down here now, because I originally mentioned that they might have just taken the signals out of here, and it's also what Haltech recommended doing as well, if you needed to install the intake air temp sensor. But basically I've tucked all the loom for the MAF up in there, so that has all your power, your ground, intake air temp sensor, barometric sensor, but yeah, that's no longer required, as you can see. So with the basically MAF being completely and utterly useless now, what I have done, since I was waiting for the car to go in to be tuned, is to rip out the MAF and replace it with basically a dummy stock position item. So this is something that I've made up, well, sorry, something I designed, and the mate who's helping me do the 3D printing for the S3 mount, yeah, he printed this for me. So basically this is in essence a like-for-like item, so all the mounting holes are the same spacing, all the same interference or dimensioning to put it into the stock airbox, because I've got no intent of removing the stock airbox. All the same little safety lips to attach your intake, your turbo intake pipe onto, so that can all clamp on properly. The diameter is all the same, but yeah, it just in essence removes all the guts of the MAF. So yeah, I've sent off a new version to finally get printed in ABS, so be able to slot that in and see how that goes, and I can rip out the MAF. I've also made an allowance here to utilize the stock O-ring, if you want to call it an O-ring, but the stock seal, so that way it's still watertight, I guess, and airtight. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've been working on. So pretty excited to get a final sample, put that in and see how all that goes. If you follow me on Instagram, you can probably see some pictures that I've posted of the updates for that. And yeah, all this wiring is still intact. So yeah, you could potentially, I think Benchmark Solutions, they offer like a wiring loom that you can plug into this to basically break out to like a flex fuel and a few other different sensors. So yeah, that's all there. I think they reran some wires for the 3-port boost solenoid, so I think most of the factory stuff's still there on that. But this is just some of the vac hosing and stuff that got taken out of it. Oh, pardon me. Yeah, so that was pretty much all the tuning side. So what did we end up coming to? So you can see here, that's blue. The blue line's power, green line's torque. I instructed Driven Motorsport to basically do an economical tune on this thing, and we came to just a whisker under 140 kilowatt or about 180 horsepower. So nothing completely utterly earth-shattering, but they did what I asked, and that was what I wanted. So it's I would, if you want to call it anything, a very factory tune. Now living on the Haltech. So yeah, nothing crazy, and I think it made peak power just at about or before 6,000 RPM, and peak torque at about 5,000 RPM. So yeah, you're making a bit of, all you're doing is just making noise after 6,000 RPM in this thing. Having only just driven, obviously got the vehicle back today, but doing a little bit of driving around, that torque dip is noticeable when you're driving. These little guys here, they're okay, but yeah, definitely from this little band of power here, that torque dip is quite noticeable, considering that these things have fuck all torque as it is anyway. It came out to under 250 newton meters. So yeah, you can feel that definitely when you're driving, but it is what it is at this point in time. Potentially some cam gears or something may rectify that down the road, but just kind of interesting to see the characteristics, I guess, of the 4G with the auto behind it in a reasonably stock configuration. So still got stock intercooler, stock exhaust, stock turbo, stock boost. Everything's still pretty much factory, so it's a good like for like. I think most people typically get about 110 to 130 kilowatts with the OEM ECU, with the factory tune that's in the ECU. So overall pretty happy. And on this one here, this is the boost level, so staying at a pretty constant 16 pound. Do have the boost controller in there, so it is possible to wick that up, but I'm not particularly fussed at this point in time. That's not the purpose. That can come at a later stage. But again, fairly solid boost from, let's call it even like 3.5 right through. So you do get a good solid boost range there. And AFRs, I think they're tuned to about 12 to 1. So yeah, wasn't meant to be anything absolutely earth-shattering. They did what I asked, which to try and create a bit of an economical tune, just to see what sort of fuel economy benefits that there are potentially on the aftermarket ECU. So at this point in time, I can't remember how many Ks it did, but definitely put a number of tanks of fuel through it, and it was hovering, for argument's sake, just at 12 litres per 100 Ks. I think I may have mentioned that in a previous video. So it's going to be good to see now, with all the fuel injectors cleaned, the IAT in position, and the wideband, and a few other just modern amenities, if you want to call it that, to see just how the fuel usage goes just for being a daily driver. So I will be keeping records on that. That'll probably be an update on that in a later video. Just to check and see how things are going. And at the end of the day, if I've still got the vehicle 5-10 years down the road, there's no issues with wicking up the power and actually making it a more performance-based vehicle rather than just an econo daily driver. So everything's all there. So it's not like I'm trying to not get power out of this thing. It's just my primary focus right now is to have something a little bit more economical. So overall pretty happy. It's kind of funny, just the rose tinted glasses of people my age and generation of just like all the hero cars with RBs, JZs, 4Gs. They did not make that much power from factory, despite how fast we thought they were back in the day. Just for reference, this is my 2021 Kia Carnival. It's got a 3.5 litre V6 in it, high comp, direct injected, port injected. This thing makes 220 horse or 174 kilowatt to the tyres, and ran a 15.1 down the quarter mile at the Bend Motorsport Park. So just, yeah, kind of funny. This thing would probably still rip off from the times versus the power for some of the Evos that I've seen, probably a mid to high 14 second if you were given the launch a bit of stick. But yeah, so just kind of funny that just the progression of time and just how things advance. Yeah, but very happy. Car drives quite nicely. The idle issue as well that I mentioned, that seems to, like, I need to drive the car a bit more, but on the surface that seems to have disappeared. So it may have generally been something a bit funky with the OEM ECU. So just a bit of a recap, what would happen is I'd pull up to like an intersection to stop, turn, traffic lights go red, whatever, and the RPM would dive a little bit, almost like very early onset idle air control valve failure. Yeah, putting it back into neutral would bump the RPM up again, put it back into drive, and it would be be okay. Yeah, hasn't happened yet. So yeah, something a little bit funky with the stock ECU. All right, I think the last thing, got a little board with my notes on it. Yeah, upper pipe, IAT, boost control. One thing I did get Driven Motorsport to do was actually put an OBD scanner onto the stock ECU, purely out of curiosity, just to see how happy or unhappy the stock ECU was. It only flagged 3 codes. One was to do with the intake air temp sensor, one was to do with the barometric temp sensor, or the barometric sensor rather, sorry, and the coolant temp sensor. And that was the only fault codes that flagged. No gearbox faults, no other weird funky issues. So all things considered, I think the stock ECU in its current configuration is quite happy with everything that's going on, which is comforting to say the least. I tried to buy an OBD, well, I did buy an OBD scanner, but it just didn't want to interface with the vehicle for some particular reason. But mechanics have OBD scanners worth thousands of dollars. So yeah, they were able to slap theirs on, give me the codes. But yeah, surprisingly, the stock ECU is happy as pig and shit at this point in time. So, but yeah, the benefit was no gearbox faults. So that is absolutely fantastic. One minor issue that is still occurring with the vehicle, and this was in before it went in for tuning, it was every now and again when you go to start and crank it, you would get like a trigger fault, and it would throw the check engine light. So yeah, sometimes you just go to crank it and it just wouldn't want to start, turn it off, turn it back on again, and it would typically go the second time. So I may need to look into getting a trigger wheel put onto this thing just to kind of help out the triggering, or it may just be a setting in the Haltech to, I don't know, fuck knows to be honest, but there might be something in there to set the sensitivity potentially to stop it from flagging constantly. So one of the benefits of the Haltech S3 is it's got a wireless connection. So when it does do it, I can just wirelessly connect to it through my phone and just clear the diagnostic code on there, and the light turns off. But other than that, it doesn't cause any other issues whilst you're driving. So yeah, I think that is most things. Now, yeah, I did mention I was in contact with Brett again. His little project that he's working on is progressing, and he is working on something for that project to do with the wiring. I'm not going to specifically say what it is, but yeah, kind of looking forward to that, because it will potentially help people wanting to do this dual ECU conversion in the future, and potentially a product that I would assume he would sell through his webpage. and it may circumvent the requirement for the rudimentary solution that I was going to try and get to with just soldering longer wires and just taping everything up, so it was all nice and neat. So yeah, looking forward to that. Yeah, because we're still keeping tabs, and yeah, overall absolutely stoked. Just need to drive this thing, see how the fuel economy is going, and I'll check back with you guys at some point in time. So until then, enjoy.